Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar for the 2025 Pledge Towards Sustainable Tuna, or as we refer to it, 25 PST. We're thrilled to have you here today. 25 PST is a refreshed commitment of the Tuna 2020 Traceability Declaration convened by the World Economic Forum in the 2017 UN Ocean Conference. As the original declaration has come to an end in 2020, the World Economic Forum, the Friends of Ocean Action, and the Global Tuna Alliance are working together to co-convene a new pledge to promote improvements towards a sustainable and responsible tuna supply chain. If we turn to the agenda for today, I'm Lisa Sweet. I am the head of the Future of Protein Initiative within the World Economic Forum's Food Systems Initiative, which really aspires to bring together a food system that is sustainable, inclusive, efficient, and healthy and nutritious, and in line with the 2030 agenda. The food systems are really focused around food security, health and nutrition, environmental sustainability, and livelihoods. They're not just about productivity. And we have a dedicated effort to support the transition towards universally accessible, healthy, and sustainable protein that will feed a population of 10 billion. During today's agenda, we have a host of different speakers from the World Economic Forum, from the Friends of Ocean Action, and from the Global Tuna Alliance. And they will be presenting the details of the new pledge to you. First, we have Christian Telecki, who is Director of the Friends of Ocean Actions. Then we have Dr. Tom Pickerell, who's Executive Director of the Global Tuna Alliance. And finally, we have Winnie Yeh from the World Economic Forum. Winnie has been leading the Refreshed Commitments effort of the World Economic Forum and the Friends of Ocean Action. Please, during today's call, put your questions in the Q&A box. You can do that throughout the session, and we'll come back and answer these towards the end of the webinar. So, to kick off, I'm really here today because tuna is such a vital part of the overall food systems, and that's why I'm kicking off this session. As you may know, fish is an essential food and provides nutritional security. It provides over 3 billion people with nearly 20% of their animal protein, and as well as the main source of essential nutrients to many vulnerable communities with no access to other substitutes. From the environmental lens, though, currently over a third of fish stocks are overfished. And from the economics landscape, fish is really critical and central to economics as for countries and to livelihoods for individuals. Currently, 10 to 12% of the world's population rely on fish for their livelihoods. At the same time, human rights abuses in the seafood chain have garnered a lot of attention recently. And from an economics lens, more broadly, fish is the most traded food in the world. It comes above coffee, tea, bananas, and sugar. Tuna, specifically, are reported to make up 30% of the total seafood trade globally. 2021 is really quite a critical year for the food systems. This year, we will convene the UN Food Systems Summit in September. The summit is convened as part of the Decade of Action to achieve the SDGs by 2030. And the Food Systems Summit is convened under 5 different action tracks: sustainable and nutritious food for all, sustainable consumption, nature-positive production, equitable livelihoods, and resilience. Moving towards a sustainable and responsible tuna supply chain can contribute across every single one of these themes, every single one of these efforts. But to achieve a transformation of the food systems, efforts to improve each supply chain, such as this one, are really crucial. At this point, I'm pleased to turn over to Christian Telecki. As we mentioned earlier, the pledge is jointly convened by 3 organizations: the Global Tuna Alliance, the Friends of Ocean Action, and the World Economic Forum. Christian is the director of the Friends of Ocean Action, and will share with us how these 3 organizations have come together in this collaboration. Christian, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and truly delighted today to be part of launching the 2025 Pledge Towards Sustainable Tuna. Some of you may recall that the roots of this pledge stem from the Tuna 2020 Traceability Declaration, which was a UN-registered voluntary commitment convened by the World Economic Forum. It was a non-legally binding declaration that grew out of a dialogue amongst governments, companies, and civil society, spurred on by the UN Ocean Conference in 2017. The declaration itself was signed by 67 companies ranging from the major retailers to seafood processors in key markets around the world. They're all committing to push for ambitious change in the tuna sector. It's also supported by 6 national governments and 21 civil society organizations. As Lisa mentioned, the declaration, as the title infers, closed out at the end of 2020. Since the declaration in 2017, the forum has increased its emphasis on ocean-based activities. And the Friends of Ocean Action was born to fast-track solutions for a healthy ocean and to achieve the targets under SDG 14, the ocean goal, which I know many of you on the line are familiar with. The Friends of Ocean Action is composed of over 60 ocean champions from around the world in different sectors who are working together to shorten the distance between ideas and action. Currently, the Friends are focused on 5 areas: ocean finance, ocean data, ocean resilience, ocean innovation, and the 5th, where the seafood work falls under in the Tuna Declaration, nourishing billions. Over the last 2 years, the Friends and the Forum have been working closely with the Global Tuna Alliance, and you'll hear more about this from Tom shortly. But the direction of this was to use commercial leverage to improve tuna management and thus improve sustainability, which is very much aligned with the Tuna 2020 Traceability Declaration's commitment to environmentally responsible tuna sources. Unsurprisingly, many Global Tuna Alliance partners are also signatories to the Tuna 2020 Traceability Declaration. This mutual alignment and collaboration led to the Global Tuna Alliance, the Friends of Ocean Action, and the World Economic Forum, as Lisa mentioned, joining forces to support the Tuna 2020 Traceability Declaration in 2019. Going forward, the Global Tuna Alliance is expanding its portfolio to include many areas beyond tuna management. Tom will explain about this further. Winnie also shortly will explain how this expanded remit builds into the 2025 pledge towards sustainable tuna. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are inviting businesses, governments, and civil society organizations to sign on to the 2025 pledge towards sustainable tuna to build on the great progress by the signatories of the Tuna 2020 Traceability Declaration and commit to clear and demonstrable improvements in supply chain practices and the management of tuna fisheries by 2025. As I said earlier, the Friends of Ocean Action and the World Economic Forum are committed to working with the Global Tuna Alliance to support the 2025 pledge, and indeed, we hope be a source of inspiration for what others can and could be doing for a sustainable and healthy ocean. Back to you, Lisa.
Thanks so much, Christian. As you mentioned, the 3 commitments of this pledge are based around the Global Tuna Alliance's 5-year strategy and its 3 pillars. So before we get into the specific details of the pledge, we wanted to have Dr. Tom Pickerell, the Executive Director of the Global Tuna Alliance, walk through the Global Tuna Alliance, tell us what its aims are, talk about the 5-year strategy, and then talk about how it connects to the 2025 pledge towards sustainable tuna. Tom, over to you.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here talking about this, and it's great to see so many of you interested in the 25 Pledge Towards Sustainable Tuna. So what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit of background to the GTA, or the Global Tuna Alliance, and as both Christian and Lisa noted, explain how we got to our 5-year strategy, and then Winnie is going to explain how the 5-year strategy links into the commitments in the pledge. So just a little bit of background about the Global Tuna Alliance. We were established in 2017, but sort of formally launched in 2019. The aim was to get the retailers and members of the supply chain who are interested in tuna sustainability to work together to improve tuna fisheries management. And for those of you who are familiar with tuna, you'd know that the vast majority of the fisheries are managed through regional fishery management organizations, or RFMOs. And this globe here, or the projection, shows you the regional fisheries management organizations. They aren't doing their job properly. There are several issues, major issues with tuna fisheries management, and that was impacting on the sustainability of these fisheries, which in itself was impacting on the commitments that these companies had made. So this is where we came from, focusing on this area. So what is what's actually wrong with tuna management? Well, this is a table. It looks a busy table, but it's a fantastic table from ISSF. They do an annual publication called An Evaluation of the Sustainability of Global Tuna Stocks relative to the Marine Stewardship Council certification. And the Marine Stewardship Council is a standard for good environmental performance of fisheries. And many of these companies have made commitments around that or equivalent levels. So what this shows here is how the stocks would score against the MSC. And you can see there is this area that I've highlighted. It's a lot of yellows, which means improvements are needed, and some fails as well. And these are all around tuna management. And actually, of the 19 stocks of tropical and temperate tunas, only 4 would achieve a passing mark for this principle of the Marine Stewardship Council. And in fact, there's only one, I think, North Atlantic albacore, that would actually pass on all the areas in this. It doesn't require improvement areas. So it's significant work needs to be changed. So this was where the RFMO was, the Global Tuna Alliance was born. It was, how can we improve the management of tuna fisheries at the regional fisheries management organizations using the combined commercial leverage of all the partners? And it's a very good strategy, and we've had some successes to date. However, as we've worked through 2020, all the partners come to the conclusion that, you know what, we could do more than this. We don't have to just limit ourselves to tuna management. And this was evolved in some way through our work with the World Economic Forum and Friends of Ocean Action on the Tuna 2020 Traceability Declaration. And as we came to the end of that work area, the end of 2020, we were developing our 5-year strategy. This is how we originally set it up. Looking at the RFMOs, how can we incorporate the supply chain voice into this decision-making framework? Can we add, can we work with the NGO community, of course, but can we add the commercial leverage to the RFMOs, but also to the catching sector and say, this is what your customers are requiring? So this is how sort of the principle behind this comes together. Here is an outline of our 5-year strategy, and you can see there's 3 pillars of work that go beyond just the original aims of the GTA, which were harvest strategies. They're still there. It's still a real key area for us. It's in environmental sustainability, but we also look at transparency and traceability, for example. Transparency is the first step towards ensuring sustainable and ethical sourcing. It includes areas like voluntary disclosure of information. There has been a shift towards increasing transparency across all different supply chains. Tuna is also one of the most heavily traded commodities. And with that, this complex journey has problems and challenges that can be addressed through increased traceability. So this is another area we're focused on. Obviously, environmental is a huge area. It's probably the original area that people are interested in. Seafood. Seafood's incredibly popular. It's eaten across the world, but with this demand comes increased pressure on tuna stocks. And it's not just on the stocks itself, but it's on the habitats, the ecosystems, the other species that are associated with tuna. And finally, on social responsibility, there are concerns about the scale of forced labor and human rights issues in the tuna supply chain. Minimum social standards would ensure that the basic human rights and dignities are respected, but there's more that can be done as well. So our partners are keen to see what they can do to improve the situation here. So this is the 5-year strategy, and Winnie is going to now cover how that translates into the 25 pledge towards sustainable tuna.
Great, thanks so much, Tom. And Winnie will now take it over to you to see how we translate that very ambitious strategy into the pledge.
Great, thank you. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And so as Tom and Christian had mentioned, and Lisa had mentioned earlier, this 2025 pledge towards sustainable tuna follows the original Tuna 2020 Traceability Declaration, which ended last year. Can we go to the next slide, please, Tom? And this, we are refreshing the Tuna 2020 Traceability Declaration with all the groups coming together. It is a new collaboration, a public-private collaboration. You may be thinking, why are we refreshing this commitment since it's coming to completion? the signatories to the original Tuna 2020 Traceability Declaration have made tremendous progress. And this is something you can see on the progress report completed, published March last year in 2020, and it's available on the Global Tuna Alliance website. There's another progress report that will be coming out later this year also. These progress reports highlighted the achievements these signatories have made in meeting what they committed back 3 years ago. However, the tuna supply chain is complex and long and have many challenges. Even with all of these improvements achieved, there's still much to be done. And we have to keep the ball rolling because tuna is a high-profile product. It captures the media and public attention. Tuna live in the high seas, and this causes complexities. Not one country or one company can make improvements on its own. They cross national boundaries and also cross different sectors. Because all of this, and because what Tom said earlier on the fisheries, the issue in the fisheries and the importance in having good social practices, we are today bringing together companies and governments and also civil society organizations to a new collaboration, this 2025 Pledge Towards Sustainable Tuna, to move the sector towards a sustainable and responsible tuna supply chain. Next slide, please. And as Tom mentioned earlier, this Pledge 2025 Pledge Towards Sustainable Tuna follows the GTA 5-year strategy. The GTA's 3 pillars in the 5-year strategy are the 3 commitments in this new pledge. And in the following slides, I'm going to talk through each of these 3 commitments in more detail. The first one is transparency and traceability. And in each of these 3 commitment areas, as you'll see in the Word document that we'll share after this, we have 3 sections for it. First is the gray box on the top. It provides some context on why this commitment area is important. And you can see also bolded in the text there, this is the actual wording that each company is pledging to. And here in transparency and traceability, the companies pledge to continually improve the traceability systems and also enable greater transparency. Each of these pledges have 2 areas. One is the supply chain operational improvements, and the other is signatories advocating at RFMO and other places. So you can see here in italic text in the middle, we have 4 paragraphs. These are what we call the minimum commitments. In each of the 3 commitment areas, we have a few minimum commitments that all the signatories will be measured against. And later on, I'll walk through a bit more in the appendix. There are more areas that companies can take action in order to meet the bolded pledge wording here. So the 4 paragraphs here, we have, of course, committing firstly to fully traceable end-to-end tuna supply chains and having this information transparent and shared by the end of 2025. And the second and third of these minimum commitments relate to the Port State Measures Agreement, because it's an agreement that is important in order to have information and to stop IUU activities. And here we have companies conducting regular due diligence and also advocating for countries to ratify and implement the Port State Measures Agreement. Lastly, on the bottom, you can see the last minimum commitment here is signatories advocating for improved transparency in tuna fisheries. And this is the advocacy commitment is something that is across the 3 commitments, and it can be done through individual companies or through collaborative advocacy. Next slide, please. And now for the second commitment area, the environmental sustainability commitment. We have similarly in the gray box some context on why environmental sustainability of fisheries is critical. And in bold, there's the text that companies pledge to source from fisheries that meet these goals or are working towards them. The 2 minimum commitments to environmental sustainability is pretty straightforward. Firstly, signatories publicly commit to source 100% of the tuna products from fisheries that meet the GSSI certification or are in a credible and comprehensive fit by the end of 2025. So there are 5 years to work towards making such a public commitment. And here we define tuna products as those products where tuna is a key ingredient in it. And secondly, just as earlier, a minimum commitment here is that signatories will advocate for the development and implementation of effective harvest strategies in the tuna fisheries. And just like earlier, this can be done as an individual company or together as a group. And third commitment area, the social responsibility. And in the gray box, we have context on the importance of upholding the fundamental human rights outlawed in the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And signatories here pledge to complete effective due diligence regarding human rights risk in the tuna supply chain, also including advocacy. And we again included 4 minimum commitments where signatories share the company policies on human rights with the supply chain stakeholders in specific. And also that by the end of 2021, that signatories will commit to establish a baseline regarding human rights due diligence. And this is by the end of this year, that signatories will have to commit to doing so while the actual baseline can be established at a later date, but still within the 2025 timeline. Then thirdly, signatories commit to implement due diligence process and time-bound improvement targets, all of this by the end of 2025, where the pledge completes. And lastly, just like in the earlier 2 commitments, for social responsibility, the signatories also will advocate for improved social responsibility in tuna fisheries. And in all of these 3 commitments, as you'll see on the next slide, we have in a document an appendix 1 that shows a longer list of actions for each of these 3 commitments of different areas signatories can work on in both improving their own supply chain operations and the operations of their suppliers, and also advocating at RFMO or with other countries in other policy areas. And the reason we have this longer list in the Annex 1 instead of in the text with the minimum commitments is because we want different types of companies along the tuna supply chain to all join in this collaboration effort, and understanding that each country, depending on which part of the supply chain they play in, and also where their starting point is today, may have different focuses they can emphasize on. So we're giving a list of options of actions each companies can take. And the goal really here is improving towards a sustainable tuna supply chain, knowing that depending on the starting point you are, the improvements you'll be able to make is going to be different from other companies. And all in all, the important point here is that these are improvements we're making and we're moving towards the direction. Now, next slide, please. And you may be wondering, can only companies sign on to this? This is a collaboration effort, and not just companies that work in the tuna supply chain, but also governments and civil society organizations can also sign on as endorsing signatories in this 2025 pledge towards sustainable tuna. Each of them may play different roles. Supply chain actors can make direct improvements in their operations and request their suppliers to also make improvements in those operations. They can also engage with countries to request them to ratify and implement legislation towards a sustainable tuna supply chain. And in the next slide, I'll talk a little more about governments and civil society organizations. They can sign on as endorsing signatories. We call these endorsing signatories because this pledge is a private sector-led pledge. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you, Tom. And however, we want it to be a collaboration. And there are collaboration is needed, and governments can play a role here. Governments in particular, those countries that are in RFMOs, or those that have vessels operating in its ports and coast and have flagged vessels, they can develop policies to strengthen the regulatory framework for these operations. Governments can also incentivize private sector to adopt sustainable practices to foster long-term quality investment. Civil society organizations can also sign on to this pledge as endorsing signatories. And their role here is very similar to their role in the Tuna 2020 Traceability Declaration, where they can support by developing and sharing knowledge, by collaborating in pilot programs with countries, so with private sector. They can encourage market partners to join in this commitment, and also begin or continue advocacy towards influencing parties. Because civil society in this topic has a strong voice, they carry public opinion, having their voices to encourage governments and private sector to join in and make improvements in the tuna fisheries and tuna supply chains will be very beneficial. And now you may be wondering, how can my organization sign on? So in the next section, Tom can discuss that more.
Thanks so much, Winnie, for sharing all that great detail. Now, the key question on how you get involved, how do you sign on? What does it require? The sign on for the pledge commences today. So Tom will talk us through the process for how you sign on, and as well the process for reporting on the signatories. In the meantime, please use the Q&A box. Following this segment, we will be turning to questions from all of you. So please feel free to use the Q&A box to share any questions that you may have. Tom, over to you.
Thanks very much. So great overview there by Winnie. So what's happening with the 25 PST? Well, the pledge has been drafted, obviously, because we're launching it today. That took place from October to January. We've registered the commitment with the United Nations, so it's now a voluntary commitment along similar to the 2021. So that's up and running. The pledge is being announced today, which is our formal launch date. And from now, today, until June, we're going to be recruiting signatories. We already have the Global Tuna Alliance partners have signed on. This is a kind of an automatic sign-on because, of course, the 2025 PST is based upon our 5-year strategy. So we're looking for, well, it's open now for further signatories. So how do you go about doing that? It's very simple. There's no forms to complete or anything like that. You just need to contact us, and there's our email addresses. It's either contact Winnie or myself or both of us, and just give us a bit of background about your organization, why you want to join. If we can have your logo as well, that would be helpful. Also, really importantly, the person responsible for the survey, for the progress reporting. So we don't want to make sure, we don't want to be sending emails to your CEO, for example. So that's all that's required. The reason we have a logo is we'd like to keep a list of all the companies and put it on the 25 PST website. So it's a good example for you to be sort of demonstrate leadership in the field of tuna. So that's all you have to do. Let us know via email. In terms of progress reporting, this is something that we wanted to talk about. As I mentioned, the program itself is part of the UN Sustainable Development Goals Registry of Voluntary Commitments. You can see us there on the right. And so as well as getting recognition for the work we're doing, there does come some reporting requirements. Each year, this is our thing here, there's no progress reports because obviously we've just launched it, but there is an annual progress report required. But this is something we'd want to do anyway. But the aim of doing this is to make sure that we can provide you with a sort of an overview of how you're going in meeting the commitments, which hopefully will be useful for you in your internal discussions or your internal decision making. For the 2020 Traceability Declaration, we did something similar. We produced a self-survey questionnaire that we sent to all the signatories. They completed it, and we used the information to generate these dashboards. These were anonymized, and they were sent to all the signatories who completed the survey. And you can see there, what it does is it gives you a private look of how you're performing against the 2020 declaration commitment. So we'll be doing something similar for the 2025 PST. It won't look just like this, of course, because the contents are slightly different. We've also done an interim progress report, so we'll be doing that each year. The final progress report is going to be published shortly. We're still finalizing bits and pieces on that. So each year we'll be doing dashboards and an annual report to that. This is how we're going to change things for the next 5 years. We're going to do self-reporting again using an online survey for year 1 and year 2. For year 3, we would like to do a third-party audit. The reason for that is to demonstrate transparency. Of course, that's one of the aims of what we're doing here, but also offer credibility to the work we're doing. Then go back to a self-report and then do a final third-party audit. There's, at the minute, and we'd like to share this with signatories, there's no intention to publicize named audits. They will be published, but they'll be anonymized. But it may be that you wish to take that out and publish it. It may be that for the 5th year, we go through that process, but that's still discussions to be had. But this is our process over the next 5 years. And for those GTA partners, this is aligned with the work we're doing as well. So there is that tie-in there. But this is going to offer us a really effective way of measuring progress, which in turn will be helpful for you to demonstrate internally what's happening. And also maybe these are the areas we need to look at. So take home messages before we go into a quick poll and some question and answers if you have any. Number 1, sign on is available from now. So you can email us and do that and we can announce the fact that you've signed on. It is not just for companies. Obviously, companies are going to be doing the heavy lifting on this, but the governments and the civil society organizations are extremely important also, particularly with my work with the civil society organizations through the NGO Tuna Forum. Your participation in this is going to be gratefully received, and you can do a lot of work by promoting this internally and keeping the pressure up and the advocacy. And the third take home is annual progress surveys, and the reporting will be coordinated by the GTA. But you can see we'll be doing that through self-surveys and a third-party audit in year 3 and 5. So before we move on to the Q&A, we've got a quick poll, a very simple one. I'm going to launch that now. And it's just for our benefit, really, to find out what you're thinking of it. It would be great if you're able to answer it. So what we're asking, we're not asking for necessarily will you sign on, but will you recommend that your organization, whether it be a company, whether it be a country that you're based in, or whether you're a civil society organization, will you be recommending that your organization signs it? And like I say, it's anonymous, and it's really just used for us to gauge interest. I'll just leave that up there for 30 more seconds. I can see how many people have voted. That would be great. Thank you.
Great. In the meantime, before we get to the results of the poll, quick question for you, Tom, is around the GTA Social Responsibility Toolkit. Comes from Stephen Fisher from Sea Delight, who is very pleased with the refreshing and direct approach of the real solutions for sustainable and responsible tuna management. So can you share a link for that and perhaps give us a bit more on that?
Yes, certainly. So the last year, during the GTA's implementation of the Tuna 2020 Traceability Declaration, we developed 4 toolkits to assist signatories with making progress on the declaration. And one of those was the Social Responsibility Toolkit that we did in partnership with an NGO in the US called Fishwise. Now, Fishwise have a platform called RISE, which is the roadmap to improving seafood ethics. So we worked with them to convert the tools they had online into this one-stop shop toolkit. And what the toolkit does is it sets out all the things that you can do in stages to improve social responsibility within your supply chains, and of course beyond that in the wider seafood environment. It's had some incredibly positive reviews. I think having that, there's a lot of info out there, but it's very difficult to actually determine where it is if you're not an expert. So that's available. I'm very happy to share that with you, Stephen. You can drop me a line and I can share that. We've also just had it translated into Japanese, and we're also in the process of getting it. We've already had it translated into Spanish, but we're getting it designed into Spanish as well. So that's going to be available because the uptake was very, very good.
Great. Thanks so much, Tom. Another question coming in, given the timeline that was just presented for the next 5 years, the UN Ocean Conference in 2022. Can you guys talk a little bit about that and how this pledge will relate? Is it a major milestone for the conference or not?
Willie, would you like to take that one? Because it's maybe more aligned to forum work.
Feel free to answer the question first. Sorry, I'm checking the Q&A box.
So the question, are we going back to the poll?
Just sharing the
results are
results
up.
of the poll.
Great.
Sorry, Lisa, what was the question?
Sorry, a little bit of confusion, two things going on. So the question is really around the 2022 UN Ocean Conference and how this pledge will relate. Will it be a major milestone?
I think it's going to form an interesting part of that. It's not directly related to it through our work, but of course it is directly related through the UN SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals. So that's the link there. So we're putting it through the UN Registry of Voluntary Commitments. But of course there is that link there. But it's not something we're actively linking it to ourselves at this point in time.
Okay, great. The results of the poll are now up. We're seeing that 81% of you will recommend that your organization signs on to the 25 PST, which is great news. We'd love to move that up to 100%. So if there are those in the audience that said no, feel free to pose questions in the Q&A chat box as to why you might have some of those concerns, constraints, not be willing to recommend this for your organization right now, and we'll see if we can help to answer them in the coming minutes. Another question that's been posed is, why will the results be anonymous? Wouldn't that full transparency actually be a better approach?
Yeah, that's a good question. And thanks, Ian. It's certainly something that we're looking at. The Global Tuna Alliance, obviously, and the progress we're going to be making will be obviously aligned to this. It's a conversation we're having about improving transparency in a stepwise process. What we don't want to do is launch it straight away and say the full results from year one are going to be named, because we don't want people to feel named and shamed or feel fear for doing that if they're trying to make improvements. So it's a case of we want people to have the opportunity to sort of identify what the challenges are through the first survey, work on start improving them, hence why we have this third-party audit in year 3. We'll have some time to have a discussion about that, but certainly I know Winnie and I share the same ambition here, that there is transparency about this. Similar approach happened with the International Seafood Sustainability Foundation, where they didn't have named audits, and the actual members themselves decided that they wanted to have that. So we're looking to have that kind of journey. So it's very much part of our thinking, but we just don't necessarily want to do it in year 1.
Thanks, Tom. I think we're talking a lot about progress and really how the trajectory can be towards improvements, which leads really nicely to the next question that's been posed around how signed entities can really have a working group channel or a way to share the best practices, the challenges that they've been facing, to negotiate improvements, to work together and support each other. What are the mechanisms that are going to be provided for that?
We work through the Global NGO Tuna Forum primarily. So this is the GTA. So the GTA, rather than have bilateral relationships with NGOs and have maybe differing points of view on different issues, our strategy is to work through the NGO Tuna Forum, where that discussion is had there, and then there's an aligned voice, hopefully, that comes back to the market that says these are the priorities and these are things we think should be taken forward. So this is something that we're working on and developing. In terms of the actual science, we're a user of science rather than a generator of science. So we would, for specific issues, we've actually hired contractors to produce evidence to inform our decision making. We've done that on yellowfin in the Indian Ocean. We've also just done it on juvenile tuna in the Indian Ocean. So it's more of us going out and getting that information to feed into our decision making. It's not something that we would necessarily coordinate or host.
Thanks, Tom. Another question coming in, I think from a participant who maybe joined a bit late, asking about how the 25 PST is executed. Is it by each individual company, organization, government, or is it kind of a collective signatory? And then whether or not there is an annual meeting for the signatories as well. So maybe just a quick refresher there.
Yeah, good question. Because this is meant to be, is about individual companies' performance. Individual companies obviously receive the documentation behind the pledge, and it also sets out, as Winnie noted in one of the annexes, all the things that you can actually do. So it sets out this is an area you can do to make an improvement on this, but it would be for an individual company to take forward and run. If you wish to do it collaboratively, and then our recommendation is to join the Global Tuna Alliance, because this is something that we will be doing within our alliance, because it's based in our 5-year strategy. Essentially, our workload within the alliance is to provide the support mechanisms for that. So for those companies that want to do it on their own, there's no obligation to join the Global Tuna Alliance, and they're very welcome to just progress, maybe using their own programs or with their own partners. But those companies who wish to do it in a more collaborative way are very welcome to join the Global Tuna Alliance, and then be get that collaborative approach and get the resources, the educational materials provided. So there's 2 different ways of working depending on your preference. Obviously, from my perspective, the more members we have, the better, because it means the greater the collective voice that we have that can advance our shared goals.
Great, thanks, Tom. Number of options there for individual organizations. Maybe another question coming in has been around the SDGs. A lot of companies are tying their overall commitments towards SDGs specifically as a great way to be communicating with stakeholder groups on what their intent is, what their ambition is. How does this pledge really tie into the SDGs specifically?
I'll unmute myself. Yes, very much so. As part of the registration of this commitment to the UN voluntary register, you have to indicate which SDGs are aligned. And for us, there are 2 SDGs with a number of sub ones that are particularly aligned. Number 1 is is life under the water, which I think is at 14, but there's also number 8, which is about social as well. So in there, it actually specifies which ones align. In the GTA 5-year strategy, for each individual work area, which you see in that document with the 3 columns, we actually indicate each work program, how it relates to the SDGs. So whether it's one particular sub area or whether it's multiple ones. So there is that, we have that direct alignment. So it enables companies to say, if they are working on this, then they can say, we're actually through this, we're working or making progress on SDG 14.4, for example.
Great, very helpful. Maybe one final comment linking to the remarks at the beginning around the UN Food System Summit. How do you see this in relation to the UN Food System Summit?
I'll leave that one to you, Winnie.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. That is very important. It's the UN Food System Summit coming up later this year in September. And we really think that because tuna is an important source of protein, it connects very well to the UN Food System Summit. And of the 5 action tracks, tuna relates to sustainability. So there was the action track on nature positive food production. Having a good or well-managed fisheries contributes to nature positive food production. And I think there was another action track on responsible consumption. So one important thing in this pledge, where we bring together the market forces, is that consumers will have a choice to choose to buy responsibly sourced tuna. And this is a very important option to offer, and it contributes towards responsible consumption of food. And yeah, so there are many ways that tuna can contribute to the UN Food System Summit, and we'll really like to bridge this conversation and these actions and these progress made to all the other progress made of improving the food systems overall, because it's not a standalone. The planet is all connected, and the ocean connects to the food needs everywhere else. They're all contributing to feeding and nourishing the billions of people we have on Earth.
Thanks, Winnie. Another question popped up. Certainly, we hope that the goals are fully met, that the pledge is fulfilled. But has any thought been given to how to address the possibility that some entities won't make their commitments by 2025? And then a related question to that, are there any plans to recognize that actually meet their targets in advance of the timeframe?
Yeah, thanks, Ross. Good, again, another good questions there. So on the first part about those companies that don't meet their commitments, GTA and World Economic Forum and Friends Foundation, we don't engage in negative sort of advocacy. That's something we're very, very sort of clear on. So we won't be sort of holding people to account other than presenting the results. We feel it's important that for some people, they're coming from quite a step backwards from other organizations, and they do need time to make the improvements. And the first step in recognizing what needs to happen is important. That being said, the fact that we have this progress reporting that is very public, it opens it up for others to maybe raise questions, particularly if they have market partners with NGOs, to say, well, you know, you're not doing well on this. The other thing you can request if you have NGO partners or market partners, if you're an NGO, to say, you know, we'd like to see your results if they're not released publicly in terms of the dashboards. So that's the kind of way we're trying to generate it, that it's that kind of pressure there. In terms of the people who are making progress, for the interim progress report, we called out examples of best practice. So for people who are making great strides or actually implementing innovative techniques, we actually included that were named in the report. We feel that's an effective way of demonstrating that it can be achieved. Your competitor is doing it, and these are things that you can learn from and build. So that's something we'll definitely be doing. In terms of if someone was to complete all the commitments, I think then yes, we would absolutely want to take that forward in a sort of coordinated communication strategy. One thing we definitely want to do is promote the examples of people having achieved things, to say this is not impossible, it can be done. But in the commitments, there's a variety of things that need to be done sort of collective. You can do them individually, but success will be collective. But then there's also the individual supply chain action. So it's a bit of a mix and match of how we can take that forward.
Great, thanks so much, Tom. I think we have reached the end of the questions. I'm not seeing any new ones pop up. So just really wanted to thank everybody today for their time, for joining, for your interest, and hopefully your action. I'm gonna just do a quick check. Winnie, Tom, Christian, any final comments from you before we close the webinar?
This is Christian here, Lisa. I just wanted to say my thanks to Tom, Winnie, you, and the rest of the team on getting us to today. It has been quite a journey, and exciting one. There's been lots of action over the last couple of years around tuna, and I think heading in a very good direction, and really great to see many of the companies on the line and businesses in the supply chain that are rallying their support for this, and really thinking about sustainability over the longer term, and especially linking this to the SDGs, not only the ocean goal, but the other SDGs as well. Equally important that we deliver on those. So just my sincere thanks to all, and very much looking forward to the Friends in the World Economic Forum collaborating with the Global Tuna Alliance and partners and others to make good on this 2025 pledge. So just a couple words from me. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks so much to everybody. Maybe we can just flash up that last slide again with the information for Winnie and Tom for those looking to reach out and sign on. Please do join. Whoops, there you go. And thanks to everybody once again for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.